So to say, I've in the last couple of months been moving through this deep understanding with Jung and publishing this series on psychological types. Um, and when I was staying in this room in Amsterdam for a couple of months, I discovered the Red Book sort of lying in wait for me there. And
Mhm.
this time of like grappling with psychological types and the Red Book really um, mm, culminated in this personal process. And so there's a way that this more theoretical sharing that I've been in um, was taken deeply within. And that's also partly what I was hearing about your context today is we're both people who have been, who have experienced the value of like intentional practice for
Mhm.
wisdom and for, in a general sense, like self-improvement, although that's maybe not the best way of framing it.
Yeah, I would say unfolding.
Yeah, nice one. Yes, exactly. And there's a way that like when it's like this difference between meditation and life, right? And so there's a
Mhm.
way that when you get to a certain age or stage of life, it kind of catches up with you. And it's like we don't have as much freedom to do intentional practice. It's just about living it and like grappling with these very real existential challenges that are right in front of us.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and like there's a way that it can be there can be a process of bereavement or grieving as we lose touch with who we've known ourselves to be.
Yeah,
Um, but when we can like draw on what we've learned to
yeah,
um, to live the theory that we've taken in,
yeah,
it can
yeah,
then come through us into relationship and into, as you say, an unfoldment of self and
yeah,
world.
yeah,
Mm. And so what I'm hearing also is that part of what we have both been grappling with is this um, conflict between different opposites,
mhm,
different polarities. Like I was hearing have to do with the masculine and the feminine within us, between strength and weakness,
mhm.
between again like intentional practice and the course of life in its totality.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I would
mhm,
say there was one other one between I would say self and other, like
mhm.
yeah, this more intrapsychic or internal relating and then bringing that out into relating with the other.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else that you feel is that you want to include in the context or the setting?
Yeah, well, like it's funny that you said grieving and bereavement of who we thought ourselves to be. I've been thinking a lot about grief, so I would bring another one between grief and love because I think grief and love are like light and they're like the light and the shadow of the same thing, right? And I think only when one grieves their grief and they're able to process and metabolize the grief does up the potential for love open up. I think ungrieved grief is that barrier that keeps us from being able to love ourselves and other people. So I'll bring that in as well. I don't know how relevant it is or like in terms of like what's going to come up, but that's something I've been really deeply grappling with, like really deeply. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it will come up. For me, what resonates there is the dialogue between transparency and privacy,
Yeah.
where
Mm,
part of my desire in coming into the call today is that I have come to a new there's something new that's come into being in
mm,
my self relating, and
yeah.
I feel called to attempt to share that.
Yeah.
The trouble is that when I like if I start telling stories about it, like if I tell you about some past experiences, then like I have to be able to do that in a way which can cast light
Yeah.
and be revealing in, I hope, a productive way, but also
Yeah.
without getting attached to any stories. And then there's a kind of
Yeah.
grieving, which is that, like, I'm talking about experiences which are deeply meaningful and personal, and there's a way that they
Yeah.
can actually never be shared,
Yeah.
and this so
Hmm.
part of this for me here, this, again, you name this positive polarity and this more negative polarity in a sense. There's something there about the existential loneliness of solitude, and singularity, that
Yeah.
there's a quality of being deeply alone, irreparable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. This reminds me of I in Doors of Perception, Aldous Huxley talks about this, how we are each are an island universe.
mhm.
And I wrote something about this that's like it's like touching on this very thing. Um, and like I am imagining a way that reading that could be fruitful, but I'm also wanting to hear more of what you're sharing. So I just want to say that like if you want to hear it, it's short. I could read some of it, or we can just keep going.
Yeah, I think, like, I feel it's important to follow intuition and follow
Mhm.
what comes up. And so if you'd be happy to,
Yeah.
like, choose the quote that's relevant, I could say in the
Let's,
meantime, while you're finding that, like I mentioned, this, the negative, like, solitude or aloneness that's associated with being one, right? It's like
yeah.
the worst part of despairing at being one and not being able to share from the
Mhm.
depths. But the
Yeah.
alternative would be, like, if we decide that we want to be in relation and that we split
Mhm.
ourselves into this multiplicity so that we can relate, well, then we
Yeah.
get the benefit of being in togetherness and being able to share, but we're also fundamentally divided among ourselves. And there's sort of
Mm.
there's a kind of reciprocal narrowing there between existential solitude, abandonment, and aloneness, and being split, being fallen, being shattered.
Yeah. 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 William Desmond, a lot of his books like follow this fourfold sense of being. Um, that is the first. It's pretty much. It also aligns to the one becomes two, two becomes three, and out of the third comes the one of the fourth. It aligns with that really like deeply. And so he talks about the one, the first one being you. I don't know how to say this exactly, but univocity, univocal. I think that's how you say it,
Whoa.
univocity, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about that, talking about the sameness and the unity,
Mhm.
right? And identity. And like that's the emphasis of that one, right? So when it's the one, when we're talking about like Mother Nature, that like pre order, pre culture, that primordial chaos of like that's oneness, but it's also none. It's also zero. And I'm writing a lot and like one put or and none, put brackets around the n, right? So if you word none, put brackets around the n, and then it's like it's the same, right? I'm so don't take that, don't steal that. No, I'm writing about this, and so that's like I'm playing with brackets and how you play with different words, and the brackets reveal the double identity of the word, right?
Yeah, I'm
Which
yeah.
emphasizes sameness and difference, but then also emphasizes the mediating processes between the sameness and difference, with the emphasis on self and emphasis on other than itself. So I'll say more about that, which is like univocity, one. Then he talks about equivocity, the equivocal, which is the difference, right? The distinction that sometimes can hold things in dichotomies and opposition, right? The poles of a polarity, right? So he talks about equivocity. So sameness to difference, univocal, equivocal. Um, and then he talks about dialectic. So dialectic is that self-mediation between the one and the two, right? Which is consciousness, right? Out of the one, sorry, one becomes two, two becomes three. It's like the divine son that is birthed of from the consummation of father culture and mother nature, right? It's the one becomes two, right? The one, the sameness, the univocal becomes the equivocal, which becomes difference in two, and then out of two becomes three, which is that self-mediating process of consciousness that mediates between chaos and order, between culture and nature. But the thing is, we can't stop at like dialectic because that's focusing on self-mediation, right? Self-mediation. It's not quite the primordial chaos because there's a self, there's an internalizing, there's a mediation that is focused on the selfness of bringing things together, right? And then he talks about the metaxological. The metaxological is more about otherness. It's more about the inter, the metaxu, the between, right? So the otherness of the being as the between. So he has a book called Being and the Between, and he's exploring this. So it's like univocal, equivocal, dialectic, metaxological. That's one, two, three, four, right? And but the metaxological is the ground for all of it. Out of the third comes the one as the fourth, right? Out of the third comes the one as the fourth, which is the metaxological. That is holding and informs all the other senses of being, right? So that's what he talked about. What you said reminded me of that. It's really
Yeah. I can hear that. And like what I was hearing from that is that this, I mean, for me, this quote from Maria Prophetessa, one becomes two, two becomes three, and from the third comes the one as a fourth, has been
yeah,
functioning as a kind of um a guiding light in this couple of months kind of internal uh transformative process which has been going on. And
yeah,
I sort of discovered it as a kind of metaphysical key that can be played
yeah,
with in real time to
yeah,
refer to aspects of the phenomenology of our experience. Um,
yes.
you were talking about bracketing, and I was thinking of Husserl and the eidetic reduction, where we sort of
Okay,
reduce
yeah,
the scope of the focus of the conversation to the deeply subjective and personal material, which has the quality of like we're speaking about things which are deeply different, like from our own experience or from our own study, but there's a way that we're also speaking the same language, we're speaking in the same
yeah,
voice
yeah.
at
There's a
the same time.
mediation. Yeah.
Yes. And for me,
Hmm.
that brought up this poem of mine, which is quite short, that I thought I would read out to you before we get that quote from Huxley, which I thought would be
Cool.
cool as well. This poem's called In
Yeah,
One Voice. It goes, to speak in one voice is not a betrayal, is to utter ancient depths of love, so urgent, so profound, that all other voices cannot but feel heard, bursting into stillness. They cannot wait to be born, up with the cry to the stars, all yearning in one voice, our mother's tongue. They cannot wait to be born, up with the cry to the stars, all yearning in one voice, our mother's tongue. This is like for me, this is where this is coming from is this feeling that when we're speaking from a certain depth of being, when we're speaking from a certain register within ourselves, that in a way, it's not about the explicit meaning. It's not about the propositions or the beliefs that we state. It's not about the stories that we're telling, even. It's about the tone. It's about the rhythm of what we're creating together. Again, it's about this selfless contributing and giving of ourselves up to a process which is uh, between us and around us, and which is guiding us and drawing us forwards. It's a
yeah,
deeply selfless and ancient uh, invoking.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is a sense of like, yeah, I like the mother tongue, that phrase, and it's like you didn't say that. Well, you said mother's tongue, but I heard mother tongue in it too. Like what my mother tongue, like in one sense, I could say it's Arabic. That's the place I come from, right? I'm from Iraq, and so I can. But another sense is like my tongue, the ability to speak itself. That's the mother tongue, the ability to communicate itself,
Yeah,
right? So it's like I'm hearing a sense like it's not about the propositions because we always convey far more than we say, right? No matter what we say, there's always like the perspective from which what we're saying is emerging from that transcends any proposition or even any process that we undergo to explain anything, right? And even deeper than that, there's the participatory engagement with one, the world, the act of speaking, with existence, with the logos, because our speech, our tongue that we are enacting the logos, right? Through that, right? It withdraws, it discloses and withdraws,
Mhm.
right? And so, like, I'm hearing in this sense of like, there's the univocal that you're describing, the one voice, the sameness, but then you're also there is the still the equivocal that's being included in that because you're talking about many and the one. But then you're talking about the mediating process of all voices being heard through talking about through the mother's tongue, right? But then I'm also hearing like so that's also hearing dialectic, but also I'm hearing the metaxological because it's like the potential to be heard and heard, hearing, listening is both dialectic and metaxological because there is a sense of between me and you, and so we're self-mediating through each other, but there's also an other intermediation that's happening from a space beyond, between, beneath, right? So that's what I'm hearing in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a way, it's a way of life, actually.
yeah,
It's a way of that can be manifest in the form of a kind of transformative dialogue, which is has
yeah,
a deeply symbolic structure. So
yeah.
it's kind of a way of using language which is deeply symbolic. So I
Hmm.
think in Judaism they talk about this like I think Ursprücht, I think is the word for that. It's this like primordial original language that
Yeah,
all languages are derived from. Um,
yeah,
See that in like individual development as well. Like babies and
yeah,
they're babbling. Like in a way,
yeah,
it's about the symbolic undertones of what we're saying. It's
yeah,
about like a
yeah,
participatory form of symbolic language that allows
yeah,
us to, yeah, I would say it's about like it has a unifying, reconciling, mediating
yeah,
property. It's able to
yeah,
hold everything that's here, all of the sameness
yeah,
and the difference. And
yeah,
it's this way of like when we talk about the fall, the split, it's
yeah,
this split into multiplicity, it's a split into differentiation, and
yeah,
it's a recognition of a discovery of, I would say, a new or an ancient form of
yeah,
language, a new way of
yeah,
using our speaking that can reconcile and mediate and bring back into uh, being here together. But the thing is, even that, it's like it has to
hmm,
be both differentiating and integrating. That's why this orientation that Jung has in particular towards
yeah, yeah,
symbolic is because the symbols that we can speak to and from and with and invoke in our language, they have like a unique functionality. They can hold the differences in a way that our more abstract uh, language is not able to. Um,
yeah,
oh, I think our signal's a little bit choppy there.
yeah. You froze for a sec.
Yeah,
I don't
can
know
you
if
hear me
it's
okay?
me.
I think we're back.
I can hear you. Yeah, the picture is off.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it better? I think it's
Yeah.
cleaned up a bit. Okay.
Okay. It's a
So,
little better. Yeah.
yeah, let's see how we go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Like yeah, in a lot of ways, I think this is what I'm hearing. A lot of ways, like the symbolic is the mother tongue, right? Or like even deeper than that, not symbolic, like the symbolon, the living symbol,
Yes,
right?
yes.
The symbol that is lived, that living is a symbol and that's participatory, right? That you participate in a deep symbol, right?
Which is why it can be so
And
invigorating and inspiring because it gets us closer to the source of
exactly,
life, to the original source, to the wellspring, to the
exactly,
fountain. Yeah.
exactly, exactly, right? Yeah. And so that's differentiating and integrating at the same time because um there's that finitude and transcendence. Like there's the necessity and possibility that Kierkegaard talks about, right? And the creative tension, the tonus that's between them, it's both dialectic and metaxological because it's not just self-mediating, but it's also a drawing forth into like it's that withdrawing, that being drawn forward into a beyond that will never transcend our finitude, but we are not just finite. We're not just our finitude and follies and faults. There's a beyond. There's a the capacity to overcome ourselves in our finitude, but not fully overcome our finitude itself. We're still bound to it, right? And
Yes.
so I'm hearing this sense of like, I lost one thing you said that I wanted to touch on. Fuck. Okay, it's done. It might come back to me, but
Yeah.
like these dialectics or these poles, seeming
Hmm.
poles that are like actually the realer thing is the polarity, is the space between them,
Hmm.
right? It's the tension. That's what's generative, right? And so,
Mm.
um, what what did you say about Jung?
Yeah,
I
I
You
think,
said there's
yeah.
yeah, say more about what you said about Jung. I in the
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the
Totally.
connection being lost, I something fell out of my
That's
head.
so, yeah, yeah, very, again, symbolic, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
the thing is, I guess, like I named this, it's been a 2 month period for me of really wrestling with the origins of Jung's own process, like in this
Mhm,
period that he had between 1911 and 1918 over the First World
mhm,
War of like creating the
mhm,
Red Book. And then only a couple of the visionary experiences that he had in that period were able, from which he was able to derive the entirety of his book, Psychological Types, um, which is like 600 pages. It's like this origins of Jung's whole system is in that period that I've been studying. And it really
mhm,
has to do with the emergence of symbols of the self and
mhm,
the relationship between the soul and the self,
mhm,
where
mhm,
this relating um, is a way of being. It's an
mhm,
I thou relating, which can give rise to what Jung perceived to be a rebirth of God process, a
mhm.
renewal of the
Yeah,
God image. Um,
yeah,
and so for me, that's I was understanding that in terms of this quote from Maria Prophetessa that we've been studying. And so this is why I'm talking about a way that, like for Jung, it's there's a lot of dialectic between introversion and extroversion, which I'll come back
mhm,
to. But it's like for the moment to say that um, when we experience a an irreconcilable conflict, when there's an obstacle that life cannot progress past, there's a challenge or a stopping point. It's like there's an inability. The resources of life are inadequate or insufficient to move forwards. Then there's a way that this um, conflict is taken within oneself. And like I use the very primordial example of like if you imagine like a monkey that wants to get some food out of a bone or a stick or something, and it can't do that. So it's like a very real example of how life cannot move forwards. There's an obstacle. And so if the monkey, if we imagine like introverts the problem, takes the conflict or the challenge within, there is then for Jung, an internal dialectic process that
mhm, mhm.
gives rise to a symbol or an
Yeah,
insight, an idea. Those are
yeah,
all the same
yeah,
thing at that level, by
yeah,
which, like by virtue of this insight or this revelation from the interiority, then
yeah,
the monkey can find a tool, a way to move forwards and progress and get what it
yeah,
needs. Um,
yeah,
and so for me, this I started to understand this quote from Maria Prophetessa as a kind of archetypal or metaphysical key
yeah.
by which,
Mhm,
um, like as we said, like one becomes two. So these
mhm,
opposites, when we can identify them, we can then
mhm,
hold the tension, hold the creative tension between any pair of
mhm,
opposites. And
mhm,
when we can just sit with that creative tension, and
mhm,
using our free will to just hold that tension within, and there's a dynamic there of participating in the pairs of opposites and also
mhm.
differentiating ourselves from them. And so it has this um, playing with the pairs of opposites, but not over identifying with them either.
Yeah.
When
Mhm,
this can when that situation can be, then
mhm,
for Jung, this is kind of equivalent to the conflict being in this introverted state. And if we can
mhm,
hold that creative tension long enough, then for him, there's a natural emergent phenomena that
mhm.
arises, and it has the function of mediating or reconciling the split
Yeah,
between these opposites. It's a kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
creative solution, which is symbolic in nature.
yeah.
And I guess that's all still theory, and that's why I kind of want to ground this in my own like things that have been happening with me, because there's a way that when I understood this by reading Jung, right? But then there was also a deeply experiential and existential participating in and embodying what Jung meant and
Hmm,
realizing what
hmm,
he meant by the self. And yeah, that whole process, it really came to a head. It really came to a kind of culmination in terms of not just discovering this key, but also a very personal, yeah, um, navigating of the split between good and evil, and this encounter with the shadow. That, yeah, if we get a chance, let's see how much time we have for it. But does that add
hmm,
some
hmm,
pieces to the question that
hmm.
you were asking?
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, yeah, like that, the like engaging in the polarities in the opposite in the opposites and then tension between, but not identifying with them. It's like, yeah, we being as between and beyond, right? And being as the between and the beyond, right? And so, and also the beneath, right? Like there's a, all of those have like be in the beginning of it, right? Be,
Yeah.
between, beneath, beyond, right? So like there's a, that's the four, I think to some degree. It's like that which holds it all,
Mm.
right? And but I'm appreciating this sense of like, okay, like that monkey example about like, okay, like the monkey faces a real life problem that is like almost like to some degree that his life is, or the monkey's life is on the line, right? And like there's a way in which there's the internalization of that and there's a grappling inside as well as outside, but like there's something that the creative tension and the engaging in the and the interplay between finitude and transcendence, between necessity and possibility inside of oneself. It's like that creative tension is what affords the symbol, the insight, the revelation of the solution, right? And
Hmm.
so that's cool. Like I'm enjoying that because it's just like it's like yeah, it's like the real life. It's like a really like simple but really like potent example of like how polarities them like polarities in our engagement with the polarities is actually like that's this the self is like the culmination of all those, right? Like the self as a logos of the psyche, and it's that which like binds the soul and spirit. And I think of soul and spirit also as finitude and transcendence, as necessity and possibility, as our nature, and as that which draws us beyond our nature, right?
Hmm.
As origin and the infinite, right? And like there's a sense of like that's like there's the vertical dimension, but there's also the horizontal dimension between self and other, or
Yeah.
self and the world, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm just appreciating that like logos and like the self as the logos of the psyche, but also there's a way in which we are we are each like we are the same in terms of we are each the manifestation of a archetype of the archetype of the self in our uniqueness, but there's that which binds us together, like the logos, the capital L logos of being, of existence.
Hmm.
So that's another, right? There's that self and ultimate self and other one, because like there's the self as other,
Hmm.
like inside of ourselves there's self and other as well. We're not just self and other, like we are other to ourselves. I thou presupposes that like there's an otherness. The thou, we can thou ourselves, we can thou objects. It's the existential stance. It's that way of relating that affords a reciprocal opening, that emptying agape love of I thou is that which opens the world up and opens us up by attuning to the suchness and allowing the moreness to unfold and emerge and draw us forward, right? And beyond.
Damn.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a beautiful one. There's something here of like you're naming all of these polarities, right? And that's why it can be so difficult to grasp this because it's not something to be grasped. It's something to get a feel for and something to participate in and something
Mm,
to invoke, something to say and to bring into being through our speaking to the logos, right? And speaking with the
mhm,
logos. And like I'm
mhm,
trying to like I'm always oriented as well to like what it would be like for someone listening to this and being here with us. And there's a way that like we keep defining these polarities, these oppositionalities in a way which is it can seem complex, but there's also a thing where it can be very simple. And this again, this
mhm,
one of them is complexity and simplicity. And it's
mhm, mhm,
like the symbol of this I'm imagining is that like if we define two a polarity, if we define a polarity then imagine like a line that connects them, right? And then we define another polarity and imagine a line that connects them. And then we do it again, and there's a line that connects them. And slowly there's an image that's created, which is like it's like the eightfold path, right? It's like the wheel, but it has many, 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 many spokes. And that's like
mhm,
from that
mhm.
we get the emergence of the symbol of the
Yeah.
self, which is
Mhm,
like again, we're talking about a creative process that can hold open the tension
yeah.
between all these different polarities, any different polarity
Mhm,
or
mhm,
oppositionality that we could
mhm,
imagine. And it's like this
mhm,
is why the symbols emerge from the depths of what Jung would call the psyche as a
mhm.
creative solution, because the symbols and a symbolic way of speaking is the only phenomena, let's say, that we know of that is able to simplify and hold all of that complexity in
Yeah.
images form. Um,
Yeah. 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 I'm hearing the large world, small world also like right here. Like it's like we always inhabit a small world because the large world will shatter us because of the what is that phrase? The combinatorial explosion of the complexity of the world and existence, right? So anytime we have to always inhabit a small world, and when our small world breaks, we get a glimpse of wonder, but it can very quickly turn to horror, right? It's like from awesome to awful, right? It's that sense of like, okay, like we inhabit small worlds and like the frame, anytime we're always in a frame,
mhm.
right? And insight is that process of breaking frame and transfiguring it or like transframing it. Um, and that space in between where like you have a broken frame and then you haven't made a new one yet. Like that's like that opening, like it's like I think I imagine that it's like, you know, like the increase of entropy in the brain before an insight happens. There's a like there's
Yes,
a sense
yes,
of like being struck by the complexity, but then there's another frame that's put
yeah.
that is beyond transcends and includes the previous one, that includes more of the complexity of the world, but you can never include the complexity of the world. A small world can never include the entirety of the large world. But in order for us to function, relevance realization is built on this realizing of small world, this agent arena relationship, so we can participate and engage, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's what comes up as I'm
Again,
hearing.
it's
I kind
in
of my
Indra's
thought
net.
fell.
It's like
Yeah,
as above,
exactly,
so below. It's like
exactly.
the self is like a it's that's why it's not our self. It's
Yeah,
the self in Jung. And this is
yeah,
like this
yeah,
there is a deep dialectic between the self, which is very personal and unique in a sense, like the monad, like who we
mm-hmm,
are and all of our life experience, which is like this
mm-hmm,
monad that we are. But there's a way that
mm-hmm.
in its uniqueness corresponds with I think what Jung would call the soul of the world. It's like this again this small world large world dynamic of this. It's also
Yeah,
it's something that uh, can be participated in collectively. It's not something that
yeah,
belongs to anyone, even though
mm-hmm,
it's and the thing here is that it's both. what is most individual or unique about us, but also something which is beyond any of us. Like the
Yeah.
symbols don't
Hmm.
belong to anyone. And this is
Yeah.
why, like, part of my experience was about, with where John Viveki talks about this, um, taking up different perspectives, right? So it was about taking up the perspective of the feminine and what I interpret as taking up the perspective of the soul. And so there's a relating from out of the soul
Hmm.
to the self. And when relating from out of the feminine, out of the soul within me, out of the uniqueness, out of the creativity, when relating to the self, uh, there would be this in this form of dynamic, in that oppositionality, that I thou relation between soul and self, which I interpreted as kind of feminine and masculine as well, there was a creative emergent process that
Hmm.
had to do with the emergence of these symbols and these geometric,
Hmm.
implicit n-dimensional hyper objects, geometric structures that for me, this is what Jung meant when he talked about the rebirth or the renewal of God, because I think it's from out of this soul and self relating that there is an emergent phenomena of quote God becoming more conscious of itself through
Hmm.
us.
Hmm.
And I think for me, this is connected with the symbols and the geometry because I really feel as if uh, the understanding of reality in symbolic form, is the deepest, some of the deepest sense-making architecture that's available to us. It has
Yeah.
this
Yeah, for
quality
sure.
of it's not something that we think. It's not just something that we feel. It's not something that we sense. It's not something that we intuit. It's all of those. And so this is why it's both an emergence and emanation, but this is
Hmm.
why the symbols and the geometric structures become so important, is because they can
Yeah.
be related with from out of all of these functions or
Hmm.
faculties of our being.
Hmm. Yeah.
For me, I wanted to say as well, like at least with Jung, it's like for me, this has also come in the form of a real grappling with Christianity in the wake of the revelation of the meta crisis and the meaning crisis, which I see as really sort of two sides of the same coin. There's this real
Hmm.
conflict of this like realization that like life may not be able to continue. And
Yeah.
there's a sense like following Viveki that, hey, we have this regressive step back towards traditional solutions, which doesn't
Hmm.
feel quite right. But then
Hmm.
the political and secular alternatives that have played out in the 20th century also haven't really worked out. And then on the other
Hmm.
hand, we have nihilism. And so it's
Hmm.
this like this triad of like solutions which don't really work. And so there's a real
Yeah.
need for a creative fourth. And if I might
Yeah.
show a symbol, I think that represents that. Let me see if I can share share sound and share screen. This is not this symbol, but it is this one. And if you can see that.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm talking here about this like if we look at the bottom half for a minute, it's like these three kinds of solutions that I mentioned, like this traditional return to, let's say, Christianity in my own tradition, or this like secular alternatives, or nihilism. None of them seem to work. And there's a way that
Yeah.
if we recognize that, there's an opening, an aporia, a need for a
Yeah.
creative solution that can be between all of
Yeah.
these. And
Yeah.
for me, wrestling with this problem, that's what led me into Jung, particularly like also
Yeah.
studying um, Jordan Hall and his conversion back to Christianity. And there's a real
Yeah.
grappling with me of like, I'm not sure that that for me is the right step. And so but I have this deep appreciation of
Mm.
the Judeo-Christian tradition. And so there's
Hmm.
a how to it's not just include and transcend, but it's like how to be able to participate in uh, these, in a sense, more traditional religious stories and ways of being,
Yeah.
but not be limited to them. And so,
Yeah.
so for Jung, this really came to a head in terms of the problem of three and four, where for him, there was no space in the Christian tradition for the fourth. So he thought of this, the Christian Trinity as the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But for Jung, there
Yeah.
was not enough space for either the feminine or the shadow or the unconscious. All of those terms share the same kind of archetypal category for Jung, that he felt
Yeah.
couldn't fit in to the Christian solution. And so there's this
Hmm.
orientation towards psychic wholeness, which looks like
Hmm.
including within the conscious half of the personality what had previously been repressed and denied in our religious and metaphysical solutions. Um,
Yeah.
that's what led Jung to this deep appreciation of needing to connect with the shadow and needing to allow the feminine for Jung, everything that was lower and not able to be included. That's why he felt that was so important. And like I'll pause, but just to say that this that's what led him into this profound introversion or internalization of this conflict between opposites. It came out of this
Hmm.
recognition that the Christian solution in the form of the Christian God was ultimately, for him, not adequate because by being defined in terms of this Trinity, it also implied the opposite. It implied
Hmm.
an unconscious trinity that
Hmm.
if you imagine that for a second changed into the form of a square, there's a way that by adding a fourth in a certain way, um, that there's a split that could be healed for Jung. And
Hmm.
I'll say a few more pieces in a minute that might clarify that a bit more, but I just said a lot, so I should pause.
Yeah, that was really rich. There's a lot here. Mm. Yeah, like the Trinities piece, like so Filler? James Filler, I think that's his name, the relationality, the as ontological ground. He talks about the Trinity. I haven't finished the book yet. I've just heard a lot of people talk about it, but the relationality piece itself, like that there is for me, that's the one as the fourth, right? And so the Trinity, I think what Filler points to is that he's addressing Jung's concern right there to a large degree. And it's like that ground of grounds, that like the primordial ground of being, right? Like that's the one as the fourth,
Mm,
right? And it's
mm,
also the one as the none,
mm, mm,
right? Um, and so yeah, yeah, and so like yeah, like mm, I like the also what you said like about the aporia and like there's an in the space in between in the void that's left in the triangulation of these three and like like no longer viable ways of being in our modern age and believing there's something that becomes possible. There's a potentiality that is like emerging in the space in between that could rise out of the void if we're able to bind through creative tension these different ways of relating and beliefs, right? From nihilism to secularism to religion. And it seems like to me, like John's work is part of what he's trying to do. He's trying to do that. Um,
mm,
and there's a way in which like he has a certain perspective and a certain he's embedded in a certain culture that doesn't that excludes like everybody that excludes a certain set of people and beliefs and so um he's approaching it more from like the academia and religion and like the dialectic between theology, philosophy, cognitive science. Like he's, but like there's also this other way of like for me, it's like
mm,
I've been connecting back a lot to like my Iraqi background and I never went to university. Like I went a year and a half and I did kinesiology, didn't like it. So there's a way in which like I come from very different contexts than a lot of the people that I'm around now. Right? And a lot of
mm,
my stuff, like I'm a poet and I do a lot of writing, but it's not very academic. I'm influenced by academia because I've taken myself into it. But what I'm saying is like for
mm,
me, my biggest teacher has been the absence, has been absence. Like I've learned a lot in myself from the processing of my grief, from the being with, from being inside of nihilism. And it's like the Nietzschean like consummation of nihilism, right? It's like taking up nihilism as oneself. It's like not just like relating to nihilism as a thing that's everything, but it's like taking oneself, allowing the self to open up as the embodiment of nihilism. That like doubting everything to the degree, but the problem is Nietzsche didn't doubt deep enough. He didn't doubt his doubt. And so he didn't fully take the self upon, he didn't take nihilism upon the self. He didn't fully complete that. Um
Mm,
and religion and nothingness, Nishitani talks about that. Like in order for the privative nothingness to become the superlative nothingness, that's more John and Christopher's language. In order for the void, for the abyss to become sunyata, there has to be the the turning on itself, the doubt turning on itself,
yes. 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 This
right?
orientation toward what's here
Yeah,
with
yeah,
us.
and not here,
Yes.
right? The, that's
Yes.
I think actually that's what's often forgotten, right? Like I'm writing a lot, and a phrase that's inspired by a book. Um, is a Palestinian author, Mahmoud Darwish.
Hmm.
It's called In the Presence of Absence.
Hmm.
And that's been in relationship to grief, in relationship to nihilism and despair. It's like, what is it like to be in the presence of absence? Aporia is also, I think that's the power of aporia in its generative and creative like potential. It's like to be in aporia is being in the presence of absence. To be in your grief is being in the presence of absence, right? To be in despair, to fully be into despair, and like when Kierkegaard talks about everybody's, it's actually very rare to find someone that's not in despair, right? That's what's wrong. Like that's what's like not real, like, or sorry, that's what's surprising. Everybody is in despair, but there's different levels of awareness and consciousness of one's despair. But to take one's despair and embody it and own it, not own it as in like keep it, but like embody it and allow it to like the Holy Spirit to inhabit you. From that, can we open up to the inexhaustible fount of intelligibility of, if you want to call it God, if you want to call it the one, the source field of all intelligibility, right? Um, yeah, that was a little bit like a lot of things that I'm thinking about trying to bring them all together, but there's always like more that I'm trying to convey that I'm not saying. So.
Yeah, yeah. I get you. It's tricky to wrap words around this thing. And there's something here where like it even this moment of aporia showed up with us in real time here, where there's a um, in the sense of the recording, there's a presence which is absent, which literally cannot speak. It can only listen and receive in a certain way. And so there's a way that um, by there's a way that if we identify any of the three structures, which is like the one and the two and the emergent between them, there's a way that those three are still stuck in aporia. There's a way that they're
Mhm,
still ungrounded or like as we say with the from the third comes the one as the fourth. If we have
mhm,
this will, which is like the Trinity that we were talking about, it's like this free will, whatever's keeping us here in the dialogue. It always comes from out of something and then back into something. And it's this orientation of the dialogue. It's this orientation
mhm,
of who are we really speaking to and with? Where are we
mhm,
really coming from and what are we really heading for? And part of it is that we don't know, but part of it is also this
mhm.
um and like the humility of not knowing what we're
Yeah.
getting to. But it's also this I think dignity that is implied in recognizing that it's not about getting somewhere new. It's not about
Mhm,
trying to achieve a certain goal, which implies a certain inadequacy to what's already here. It's about uncovering, unveiling, unconcealing, unfolding
Mhm.
what is already here at, at,
Yeah,
at deeper levels of depth and also simplicity,
exactly.
so that we can be
Yeah.
in clearer relation with
Mhm.
what we're already participating in, which is the force which
Yeah.
is implied by the dialogue that we're engaging in.
Mhm.
Um, for me,
Yeah.
like if I can, like with Jung, this it came in the form of this deep internalizing of the split and
Wait, can
realizing,
I pause you
yeah,
one
please,
sec?
yeah.
So I want to make sure we get to what you wanted to share about concrete in your life, like what's happened, how this is in your life happening. I don't think we got to that yet.
Yeah, well, I I'm gonna
We got
choose
like
like
20
a,
minutes.
yeah, I got like a part of it that I want to express and cover. And so
I
that's
just
what
wanted to
I'll,
invite that
yeah,
in
yeah,
case we
thank you.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is important. There's a way that this I guess like what I realized was that for Jung, this realization that the Christian God implies its opposite manifest in the form of this deep internalization of the split, of the oppositionality, of the duality. And that's what really made Jung a Gnostic. It was his realization that the God was not necessarily all good in the way that Christianity claims. And for him, that manifests in the form of this revelation of a new God, which he called Abraxas, this kind of combination of the Christian God and the archetype of evil, so to speak. And for me, there was this just in the last couple of months, a period of deep isolation and solitude in wrestling with all of this material. And that came in the form partly of like, again, it's like abstract and theoretical understanding, right, of thought thinking, but also like it had a deeply existential and personal quality where it was something that I was living through in real time. And it was really challenging me on a day-to-day level of how to find a creative solution in terms of my own life, how to move myself forwards into life. Um, and so for me, like I talked about this uh, realization of that quote from Maria Prophetessa as a kind of metaphysical key. But the thing is that to avoid it being aestheticized and held at arm's length in the way that Nietzsche succumbed to, it has to be taken within oneself and participated in as a religious and metaphysical problem. And this is the key difference that, like, as you're saying, it's the stepping into the void. That's also equivalent in Jung to the internalizing or introverting of this conflict, which is the equivalent of that example with the monkey that I named earlier. It's this realization or recognition of this deep conflict in Jung that really plagued him
Yeah.
and messed with his life in a deep way. And for me, it was like
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, I've kind of inherited this problem. And
Yeah.
it was deeply like being pulled down or sucked down into a kind of um, metaphysical or existential whole, and then it's
Yeah.
like this internalizing of the problem and really wrestling with it, and it really came to a
Yeah.
head.
I just want to say this. It's the existential reckoning with the problem. Like reckoning. I love that word reckoning. Right. So it's like there's the reckoning, deep reckoning with the problem itself. And it's like as the problem. It's like you become the problem reckoning with itself.
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking up the etymology of reckon. It's from the Old English recount or relate. um
Yeah.
yeah,
Like relate. Yeah.
give an account, being of an opinion, give an account of items received. To reckon with is like to reckon with something is to give a kind of personal valuation of it. There's a real grappling with it. There's a kind of
Mhm.
and it was what I talked about was like, do I accept the split? Do I accept
Mhm.
the fallen condition? Or like if this quote that I speak of, if it can really serve in the way that I describe as a way to reconcile the split between any pair of opposites, if that's true, then it would have to show up in my own life, in my own intrapsychic experience. It would have to
Mhm.
work and function in that way. And so this was why for me, the problem ended up being so personal is because for me, one of the deepest questions has been, am I enough? Am I adequate to life? And so there's a way that,
Mhm.
bless you, there's a way that
Thank you.
finding the creative solution, hopefully, is for me, it ended up being proof of kind of the viability of my own way of life. And that's part of the
Hmm.
why it had such personal depth for me, this like particular existential wrestling. And it had come after several
Yeah.
years of feeling as if the Red Book was sort of waiting for me and that I wasn't ready for it. And then sort of
Mm.
discovering it there waiting for me was this real deeply taking on the problem that Jung
Yeah.
had sort of left us with. Um,
Ah, shit. Sorry. I tried to
it's
mute
okay.
myself. It didn't work.
It's all good. Bless you. Bless you. And
Thank you.
so to say that for me, and what I realized in Jung was that one of the deepest splits, the oppositionality in what we've inherited through Western culture, or at least what I've inherited through Western culture, is this split between good and evil.
Hmm.
And this is really the core of his issue with Christianity, is that there was no space for the archetype of evil in the conscious pantheon in Christianity. It was pushed away and repressed and denied. And so for Jung, what that implies is we would have to hold the oppositionality between good and evil within and be able to sufficiently participate in good and evil, each of them,
Yeah, yeah,
and also
yeah,
differentiate ourselves from them, but then without choosing and acting in such a way as to bring evil into the world. So I'm talking
yeah,
here about if we can, is there a way that we can resolve the problem of evil by being the solution to the conflict between opposites? Where if we
yeah,
can't be the solution, then evil will flow through us into the world.
yeah. Like I'm hearing a little bit about Nishitani talking about evil and religion and nothingness, and he talks about evil as like actually being a part of the ground of existence, a ground of being, and like there's something about like the taking up on of nihilism that's also like the taking up on evil onto into oneself, right? And that taking up into evil into oneself, it's like the I think partly in the idea of shadow work itself, the integrating of the shadow, is that process of taking, like bearing bearing the one's responsibility to like the one's own capacity to become a monster or something like that. It's like Jordan Peterson talks about this. It's like you're not virtuous if you're nice and harmless. No, you need to like the person who knows that they're a monster and then who can be a monster and tempers that, that's strength. Like that's virtue. Like that's kindness and like, but it's like the person who's harmless and meek and is not, that's not a virtue. That's this weakness, right? The person who can take evil on unto himself or themselves and realize that anything that another human being is capable of doing that has done in the past, you're capable of that too,
And
right?
it was
It's just,
exactly that conflict that I came face to face with. It was this
yeah.
realization of my own capacity for evil. It's funny you
Hmm.
mentioned the word meek. I remember obviously the meek shall inherit the earth, and Peterson at one
Hmm.
point talked about the etymology of meek being those who keep their swords sheathed, which is
Oh,
like
I didn't
yeah,
know
which
that.
is like it's that's a funny one, right? Where it's like this
Yeah.
um better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Like this capacity for
Yeah.
integrating the shadow, being able to be a
Yeah.
monster, but having a leash on that. Having it's not
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly control. It's more like right relationship with the shadow, such that it can be deployed for good in
Yeah.
service of the
Yeah.
whole, rather than
Yeah.
for destruction.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and like I wanted to say, part of this internalizing of that conflict, that split within me. I was in a social context where I was deeply isolated. I didn't have the in-person support that I normally would. It felt also like a challenge that I really had to face on my own. It was a very personal
Yeah.
uh moment of crisis. And the thing is that like when I started to play around with this metaphysical key that I've been talking about, this quote from Maria Prophetessa, it that's the thing. It has this, if it does really serve as this mediating function, what Jung called the transcendent function of mediating the split between opposites, then it's not clear that it's for the sake of good. It can definitely be used for the sake of evil. And so
Hmm.
as a result of grappling with this quote,
Yeah.
I started to see actually opportunities to exploit people in real time. And this was why this conflict was so confronting, because it was like this quote and this
Yeah.
it started to show up in my life in a creative way. It allowed me to
Yeah.
see structures in a certain way that constellated the archetype of evil within me that I then
Mhm.
needed to grapple with and hold.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's partly why it was so personally confronting, is because I was really beset by this problem,
Mhm.
this choice, where
Mhm.
in the situation that I was in, there was this like there was a situation where not many people were very friendly. There wasn't this deep
Mhm.
I thou relating that was present. It was very impersonal and isolating. And because of that impersonal quality, because of the lack of personhood, I would say the lack of soul in the
Yeah.
relations, in the relational field, that it
Yeah.
became like evil became, it seemed to be much more available as a choice. It seemed to be
Yeah.
much more present. This is the thing, when I could really see this, it
Yeah.
was very the temptation became very strong because it was so easy, right?
Yeah.
And this is why I had these different voices that were pulling me in different directions. These different because ultimately we were in this position of acting and creating ourselves into being, and we have to choose. We have to choose how we want to be in the world. And so there really these different voices that were pulling me in different ways, and I had to find a way to hold this tension within myself in a way that was really, it was excruciating. It was really tearing me apart for a while because this, for me, this oppositionality is quite old. You know, there's this grappling and wrestling with myself that is come over the course of years and decades, really, to this couple of month period. And what I found was exactly what Jung predicted in a way. And this is partly why studying him became so important and helpful. And I was so obsessed with it in this period, even though I kind of inherited the problem from him as well. What I found was that if I could simply hold the creative tension, hold the conflict between good and evil within myself, and bear it as a kind of burden, and bear it as um, it was horrible. It was like being torn apart for a few weeks. It was really not a very fun experience. Um, what happened was like the will to hold that oppositionality served as the third in this structure that we've been talking about, right? It's this
Mhm.
free will to hold the creative tension. And as this conflict was internalized, um, I came to a revelation of what Jung would call the self. So there's a way that um, when I could hold this creative tension, a vision of the self appeared in symbolic form that allowed me to uh, uh, find the inner resources, the inner strength to resolve the conflict in a way which didn't cause harm to anyone.
Mhm.
And for me, this was so um, it was so relieving, and it was like proof of the viability of this way of life that I've been unearthing and discovering, because there's this way that I could again participate in evil sufficiently to recognize it within myself, but then out of my agency as a free creator of my own future and of our own collective future, recognize that I didn't want to give space to evil doing in my action. And it
Mhm.
was by, if I may share this I'll try and share again the symbol. See if I can. Yeah, this one.
Mhm.
So I had this experience where I was lying on the floor of my room and I was looking up at the ceiling light, which you can see here, and I was seeing this light, which is at a mundane level. It's just like a ceiling light. It's nothing special, but I saw it in such a way that it appeared as a symbol of the self. And what I mean by that is that um, I had a realization looking at this structure that out of the relationship with the self, out of our self relating, the future comes into being through us. And so it was a situation where the structure of this light that you can see corresponds in a certain way with the quote, where again it's like one becomes two, two becomes three, and from the third comes the one as the fourth. I saw this, I could see the sun and the moon. I could see also the this darkness as a kind of void, as like a full pluripotent void. Um, I could see this triad or trinity here as embodying the three part of the quote. And then there's a way that it, as a real or manifest physical structure, it embodied the fourth that is indicated in the quote. And like what this meant for me, the meaning, and it's difficult to unpack the meaning of this. This is why it's tricky to talk about, right? But the seeing of this symbol, that seeing itself was equivalent to finding the inner resources to resolve the split or the tension. Like there's a way that it wasn't a matter anymore of needing to choose between alternative futures. It was a situation where when I could see uh, and relate with, when I had this ego self relating, I could see that from out of that relating, the future was naturally arising. And the future
Mhm.
naturally arising had the form of being able to make the right choice. And it was
Mhm.
like, again, when I say make the right choice, it implies that there were alternatives. But for me, it was like this the seeing of the self and seeing it clearly, this self-realization was equivalent to um, creating the right path in a way where there was no alternative that was possible. It was simply the right way naturally arose in the seeing of the
Mhm.
symbol.
Mhm.
I should maybe pause there because it's again tricky to talk about this stuff in a way that makes
Yeah.
sense to anyone. But yeah, what does that bring up?
Mm. Well, I'm just like aware of the time, so I
Yeah.
gotta go in the next few minutes. Yeah, I think what I'm feeling right now is a little floaty.
Mm,
Like I'm feeling like and kind of anxious in an unsettling way. Like my head is kind of like feels dense and full, and I kind of feel like disembodied and like
mm,
yeah, yeah, because it's like I think in part it's like as much as we are talking about life, or like you are talking about like how this manifested in like your living, like in how you live, there's still a primarily like playing in conceptual space
yeah.
that feels disembodied.
Hmm.
And for me, like right now, as I'm listening and unsettling, and like, and I'm just noticing how like
Yeah.
that, like, so I'm very somatic and like I have very intense somatic experience. And like, I've been noticing more and more the wisdom of my body and like feeling and honoring it. And so, like, yeah, so like, I'm almost like feeling into the sense of like, I'm appreciating what you're sharing. And there's like, okay, like, we are lived beings and our beings are bodies. Like it's not like we're like it's
Mm, hmm.
we are flesh and blood, right? And oftentimes we forget that, right? Sometimes I forget that when I'm like reading or like doing these things. And so I think what I'm like wanting is like, how can we feel our bodies more as how can our bodies speak this, right? And like, yeah, like there's like a visceral a visceral experience that seems missing right now, because this is a existential visceral like grappling when it's taken really taken in and undergone, right? And there's a way in which, like, I guess I'll leave us with that question of how can we take this onto ourselves in a way that's
Mm,
deeply embodied
hmm.
and visceral, and allows us to involve the whole self, but not be self-involved. And that involves the whole self, I think also is like the lived symbolon, which is the body, right? Yeah. Yeah, and like a few things like Cody talking about like how our experience and conceptual space and social space and how we map space in general, like all of that is geometric. And I also like
Hmm.
think like neural networks, but I'm also thinking in the ways that our body, like biomechanics. Biomechanics is very deeply geometric and so I'm just like wanting to like maybe next time or when we all get together, it's like I want to be more with like, yes, I agree with everything you said, the symbol of that light and how like we see symbols everywhere. We just got to we just got to tune our vision and our perception to them. And
Yes.
it's like what you're describing. It's like, yeah, you're seeing real life patterns.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
you're recognizing, recognizing, because our cognition is also that pattern
Hmm.
and increased complexity. And so we are conforming. This is a contact epistemology, like conformity theory of like conforming ourselves to the world that helps us know ourselves and the world deeper,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
hearing all that and I'm like, okay, how can we bring our bodies into this or bring this into our bodies more?
Exactly. Totally. I really
Right.
get you. I'll let you go just to say that, like, for me, it
Yeah.
has this
Yeah.
edge of self-disclosure of like wanting to
Yeah.
share more about this, but it's really pushing my edge of how transparent I want to be.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
requires me to be quite vulnerable. But as you're saying, it's like I can't
Yeah.
get stuck in this relating of memories, like telling a story about something that happened in the past is taking us
Yeah.
away from the lived experiential participatory reality
Exactly.
of what's right here. Right. And so this,
Yes, I appreciate you saying that so
yeah.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
no,
I
keep
really
going.
get you, and it's just like it's extre for me it's extremely vulnerable to try to share about this stuff,
Yeah,
and because it really like it paints myself as
yeah,
someone that's morally questionable and has this deep conflict within me, and so I
yeah,
will yeah maybe we can try again another time, or like
yeah,
there's an
yeah,
opportunity for asking questions about like what really happened, or there's a way of embodying the viscerality so that you will definitely
yeah.
be able to feel it. I really feel confident
Yes.
we could get there. Um,
Yeah, because I find like in the playing in the conceptual space, it feels starts feeling less and less like a relationship.
Exactly. It's me telling a
So I
story, which
was
is
no
using the space. Yes.
Yeah, and then so what was happening in me, I was feeling more distant from you. So my mind, I started almost like losing interest and almost like just getting like like I'm all about relationship and heart to heart, and
Yes,
everything for me has to be built on that space. And
totally.
sometimes it's like when we're only playing in the conceptual space for too long, and there isn't the vulnerability of getting skin in the game of bringing your flesh and blood into this and us having a visceral exploration as well as conceptual. Yeah, there's that divide that happens. And then for me, I start losing interest and I start getting tired and I'm like,
Yes.
uh,
It's so ironic because in my attempt to be more self-disclosing and more vulnerable
yeah,
about sharing from my lived experience, it seems like I'm not quite comfortable enough to do that yet and to be as
yeah,
vulnerable as I really need to be. And so it took us
yeah,
away from our lived experiential feeling of what was here. That's so fascinating.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
appreciate your opening to what I was saying and taking it and seeing it and reflecting on it. There's a vulnerability in that. There's a humility and vulnerability in that. So I want to appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the call. It was like really wonderful
Yeah,
and like I feel so it
yeah,
was such a rich dialogue and like I
yeah. I
really
agree.
appreciate the opportunity to like open up a space of
Yeah,
vulnerability that we can definitely like return to and explore more if need be,
cool.
if we want to.
Yeah,
I think it can be really
yeah.
enriching and yeah, very visceral, believe me. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily wish such experiences upon anyone, but yeah, let's yeah, until next time then.
All right, brother.
Much
Have a
appreciation,
wonderful day,
Faisal.
Sam. Yeah,
Uh,
likewise. I'll talk to you on Saturday, right?
sounds
With the
good.
guys.
I'll see you there.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
You too, man.